Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. If there are some hiccups with confirmations, maybe for Matt Gaetz and RFK Jr., that might be what prompts Trump to try again this idea of recess appointments. So notable that the new Republican leader in the Senate is suggesting that he doesn't want to go that route. John Thune says he hasn't taken it off the table, but in an interview with Bret Baier on Thursday, he said advice and consent, that's the Senate's constitutional role when it comes to confirmation of nominations to the executive branch of the government, and we take that role seriously, which I guess I read as a subtle suggestion by Thune that he is not inclined to go this direction of recessing the Senate so that President Trump can make appointments without any Senate confirmation process. Kim, what do we know about John Thune? We're so used to talking about Senate leader Mitch McConnell, given his extremely long tenure. Thune elected this week by his colleagues. The final vote was 29-24 over Texas Senator John Cornyn. What's your sense of Thune and the kind of leader that he will be for Senate Republicans now?
What you saw the Republican conference do this week was essentially choose functionality and potentially unity over division. And here's what I mean by that. You had John Thune running. He's the whip. He's been the whip for a number of years now. He's got deep relationships with most of his conference, and that spans the gamut from really conservative members to those who are more moderate. John Cornyn was also in the race, a senator from Texas. He held the whip job prior to Thune, so he also had a lot of those relationships. But you had an outside challenge from Florida Senator Rick Scott, who categorized both of them as mini McConnell's establishment, not caring enough about blowing up the chamber and radically changing the rules to give members more control, and, a suggestion that they weren't aligned enough with Donald Trump. That was sort of the choice. In the first round, Rick Scott only got 13 votes. That's about his ceiling. And then it went to the second round with the results that you mentioned. And that was the GOP caucus understanding that now that this election is over, the entire premium in the Senate is going to have to be on sticking together with those 53 votes for what are going to be some really big decisions coming forward, whether they're nominees or whether they're judicial appointments or whether they're the great big reconciliation bill to extend a Trump tax cut measure, etc. Rick Scott, I'm not saying he would have been a bad leader, but he was very much the voice of more of a conservative minority in the Senate. So John Thune, he's well respected, well liked. He's very cool under pressure. Just a quick point on nominations. He's out there making the distinction. I think you'll hear him make the distinction between a situation in which the process has happened for vetting a nominee and Democrats are blocking what's clearly the majority will for confirmation. That might be a scenario in which you debate a Senate recess appointment. But the question is that there's a nominee that can't even muster 50 Republican votes. To then go into recess is to thwart the will of his own conference. And I would also add, it's not really his choice, because this is something people are forgetting. You need 50 votes, 51 votes to call a Senate recess. So if you've got 4 Republican senators who refuse to vote for Matt Gaetz, they will also refuse to go into Senate recess. And so this isn't like John Thune has a magic wand he can wave to do this on his own. This is going to be about decisions of members in his caucus. And Donald Trump would be better to focus on putting people forward that can pass or convincing Republicans to vote for them than leveling a lot of attention on John Thune and recess appointments.
Kim, one more question on this Senate election. Were you surprised at all by the margin and the fact that Donald Trump did not weigh in here? Because if you were going on Twitter, for example, it was easy to find MAGA supporters saying that Rick Scott has to be the way. He is the only way forward. And so what do we make of the fact that Trump himself himself did not get involved, and that Scott fell short by a pretty significant margin in that first vote.
There was a last-minute huge pressure campaign, and it was clearly designed to gull Donald Trump into wandering into this and saying, I'll only accept Rick Scott, much as he did with endorsements when he was out of power. That's the difference. Donald Trump is about to re-enter the White House. He needs a Senate leader who's on his side, and he needs a House leader who's on his side. Rick Scott could not win this election. You probably could have got it closer if Donald Trump had given him an endorsement, but he simply was not the candidate of the vast majority of the senators voting. And by the way, this was a secret ballot, so they weren't going to be swayed by the pressure. So to have gone in and endorsed Scott would have been to back a losing horse and to have potentially alienated or angered the future Senate leader who was always going to be somebody else. It was wise of him to stay out of it, especially because he knows better than the MAGA people online that actually he has a good relationship with both John Thune and John Cornyn. And while they were suggesting on the other side that, oh, these guys are anti-Trump and they will not help him out, he knows that that's not the case. So it was a wise decision overall.
Thank you, Kim and Alicia. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.